I also had lots of doubt, like many times on this, journey. And I was like, oh, like I was never going to give up, but I was also like, God, like this is never going to happen. Like I thought that many times.
If you can relate right now to what John just said about his actuarial journey, then you are not alone. Spoiler alert, John did get the job, and in this interview he shares everything about the process and the difficulties that he went through.
I'm really excited to dig into how you made this all happen and like what parts of the AAC were able to help you in getting your actuarial job as well. So first off, let's talk a little bit about what kind of job you got into. Just tell us a little bit. I know you're not in the position yet, you haven't started working, but just tell us a little bit about what you know so far, what it's going to be like, and then we'll get into all the details about getting there.
Yeah, so the position it's going to be more of the SOA route. So I'll be doing pension planning, things like that. So we'll be working with a lot of client data regarding like risk for funding pensions and annuities, things like that for various clients' employees. That's kind of like all I know so far. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it though. It sounds really interesting, and I really like the people I'm going to work with.
Before we get into the good stuff, I just want to reminisce back to February of this year. I actually was able to talk to John through a coaching call, and about a week after that call, I followed up with him to see how the exam that he was going to take and the interview for a stepping stone position went. Unfortunately, at that time, John was feeling really discouraged. He had just recently got news that they were not going to move forward with him for the stepping stone position, and he did not pass exam P, just like I and many others have gone through as well. Bria, don't forget to mention how you actually failed exam P twice, and you failed exam C many more times than that, and you might have failed a few more exams too. It's safe to say that John was feeling down, but just 6 months later, right now, 6 months later, John is on cloud 9 because he's been able to make his actuarial career a reality. That's not to say that it only took him 6 months to get to the place he is at now. It took longer than that, but in this interview, John is going to share all the ups and downs, everything that he went through in order to make this happen, in hopes that if you are someone that is feeling discouraged, maybe feeling doubt on your actuarial journey as well, you can have confidence that it actually is still possible for you, and this is going to give you the motivation to keep going too.
How was the interview process for you? Was it multiple different steps or just one interview, phone interview? How'd it go?
So the interview process for this job was interesting. It was a little more straightforward. So there was an initial screening with the HR recruiter, and they asked the very basic questions. Like they kind of go over your resume, just kind of not a whole lot of behavioral questions. It was more just kind of like my background, and like what kind of role I was looking for, what I was looking for out of the role, and also they asked me about my actuarial exams. And at the time I had only passed exam P, and I noted on my resume that I was actively studying for exam FM. So I think the fact that I was showing that I was committed to the actuarial career field, and I was committed to the exam track, I think that worked well for them. And so yeah, that first phone screening, they kind of asked me those things. Also asked me a little bit about my previous experience in internship roles, and then after that I had 3 more interviews, and each of those 3 interviews was with a different actuary who works for the company. And so yeah, and basically there are people I'd be working with. 2 of the actuaries, are kind of different levels, and then the last 3rd interview I had was with the senior actuary who will be my boss. And it was a big mix of kind of like behavioral questions and also kind of like situational questions. A lot of the kind of like I would say the first 2 interviews, it was very much like the behavioral questions were very kind of straight out of the playbook. It's like, oh, how do you like handle X and Y situation, or how do you work with this kind of person, or and then also they asked me more in-depth details about what I did at my previous internships, and then also like asked me about maybe some like technical projects I've done, things like that. And then my last interview with the senior actuary, he asked me he asked me a little more in-depth questions about my past roles, like more specific questions. So he was yeah, he was a little more rigorous about that than the other two, and then some behavioral questions. And then he asked me a lot more kind of personal questions, just like about me, like my hobbies. You know, I think he was trying to get to know me more, which was cool. So yeah, and all three interviews went pretty well. I feel like I really I really hit it off with everybody, and they did ask some technical questions, but not like really specific. Like I wasn't given any projects or anything, or like specific technical questions about Excel. It was more so like, oh, how would you handle this situation, and or like how would you approach this problem? Um, and then actually, I would say one of the most important pieces of advice that I got from my last interviewer was he said, you know, we really like seeing, he's like, it's kind of, we don't, it's not really spoken that you're supposed to do this, but you know, when we interview candidates, after the interview process is done, we really like hearing back from them and just saying, he said, I think it would look really good on your behalf if you just emailed people saying thank you so much, and I'm still very interested in, you know, as long as you express that you're interested in the role, that looks really good to us. So I really wanted to offer that piece of advice to people, where it's kind of an unspoken rule where if you finish a round of interviews and you make it to the last round, it's really important to email them immediately after and thank everyone and say that you're very interested in the role. And I think that really, you know, to quote my interviewer, he said it kind of, it makes you memorable essentially, because you know they interview other people.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think a lot of other future actuaries will probably go ahead and not hesitate
Yeah,
to write that email afterwards, because
yeah,
I do think it's kind of a wishy-washy thing. Like, do I send it? Do I not? No one really knows. Bria, shouldn't you of all people know that?
oh, and by the way, I actually sent them, since they didn't ask a lot of technical questions in my interviews, I actually sent them some previous projects I built in R and Excel as well to demonstrate. Because my last interviewer told me that as well. He's like, oh yeah, go ahead and send, you know, thank you email, and maybe send them some Excel project or something to kind of show them what you. So yes, that was another, thank you for reminding me. But
Actually,
anyway,
that's another good thing to touch on, though, is just like a lot of the time interviews may get a little bit off track and they may not get a chance to get to everything, right? But technical skills are so important. So if you can send stuff to them, that helps a lot too, which is something I've never heard being done before, but I really like that advice. In the past, I've heard of others sharing their screen and showing a project during the interview, but that's not
yeah.
always possible, right? So you took a
Yeah.
different approach there,
Yeah, and
Ashali.
I think I hit it off really well with the interviewers. So, you know, we got kind of talking about, you know, various like hobbies and things, which I think showed I was a good fit, you know, maybe a cultural fit, or, you know, I could collaborate well with people. But yeah, and I did that at the request of him. He said, yeah, you know, just, I would say send them like a thank you email, like making sure you express your interest if you're still interested, and maybe go ahead and send them some technical projects you've done. So I did that immediately after the interview. And yeah, so I sent them an Excel project I did, and then a project in R.
It wouldn't be a success story if we didn't talk about tech skills at some point, right?
Where did you get your projects? Like the R one, was that something
Okay.
that you had done, and then the Excel one?
Yeah, so my undergraduate degree was very technical. I studied applied mathematics, but at my university we had to do a concentration, and my concentration was in data science. So I had taken a lot of machine learning and data science courses over the course of my undergraduate. And, you know, in those classes, you do tons and tons of projects and you learn a bunch of languages. So, you know, I have a lot of projects like in Python, R, and SQL, and you know, and actually, one of the Excel projects I submitted, you actually helped me with through the AAC, so that was cool. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. I'm
So,
glad you were able to use one of those two.
thanks. Yeah, so I used a project that I had done previously in college through my coursework, and then another one from the AAC.
And it sounds like during your particular interview, though, they didn't ask too much about the technical stuff, or was that still a fairly big topic? It's just that you didn't go into the details.
So they didn't ask a whole lot of technical work because I think the role that I applied for, they're really focused on training new actuaries, and so I think they weren't so much worried about technical knowledge like in Excel is important to them, but I think the fact that I sent them a project helped. But they did ask me. The recruiter did ask me beforehand if I had experience with Excel, and I said yes. And so I think they kind of went off of, the trust system there. And, they did ask me I think maybe they also got some technical insight because I was able to describe a lot of my technical work with my previous internships with them. And so I think that was able to give them some more insight into my technical skills. But in other interviews I was doing for other companies, I think they did ask some technical questions before. Like I've gotten take-home projects before. Like a lot of companies are kind of different.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. It seems like some companies barely even talk about the technical skills. Some focus on it a little bit. Others do this whole project where you have to use Excel and really
Yeah.
prove your skills. So it varies a lot.
Yeah, so I think with this particular role, it's also they have a separate software department that builds their tools, and I think with my role, we use statistical models, but it's more so like we take the data, we kind of work with it and feed it into a tool. So apparently it's kind of like they have a separate department that updates their tools, but they said it's really good to have a working knowledge of the software, which I think they liked. But actually I've done other interviews with companies where like the last one I had, I made it to the last round. In the last round, they gave me a take-home project in Excel about reinsurance data. And that was actually a project I received help from you on and AAC resources just for kind of like VLOOKUP and those kind of more syntactical questions. So yeah, that was one of the ones I submitted, as a final, because it was a good project and it was relevant because we were using reinsurance data. So yeah, companies are, they're different in what they ask for.
Okay, so now that we've talked about the
Yeah.
technical, tell us even more about how you gained those skills, because I'm sure some of it, using it in the real world, came from your stepping stone positions. You worked really hard to get a good stepping stone position that helped you eventually get this job. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so let's see. Do you want to hear about just that specific role or both of my experiences?
Yeah, I'd love to hear about both of them.
Yeah.
I'm particularly excited about the second one, but I want to hear about both.
Hey, future actuary, I really appreciate it when you give videos a thumbs up. It helps with that YouTube algorithm thing, So if you could take 0.5 seconds to give it a thumbs up, I'd appreciate it a lot.
I had an internship, like my junior year of college, and that was more in like finance in private markets. And we were kind of looking at it was basically like a risk analysis internship, but in private markets. And so I used a lot of Python and a lot of SQL in that, and we were building machine learning models. And that was cool. And that was actually about a year. I worked through that while I was in school. And that was cool. So I was able to develop a lot of technicals or, get a lot of real life machine learning experience and like data science experience. And then the most recent one I did. So actually my last kind of stepping stone internship was I had actually been graduated for some time out of college, but the job market here in the US for tech like data science and computer science actually is really bad, and there are a lot of layoffs and no one was really hiring. So I was kind of freaking out and I was like, oh well, I need to find a way to get like stepping stone experience because I want to be an actuary, and I kind of saw that the mainstream route of just applying to jobs, doing interviews was going nowhere. Like I was submitting, like hundreds of applications and I wasn't getting any responses. And so I actually kind of, and actually the AAC was helpful with this in terms of kind of encouraging different places to look for opportunities. And I thought of the idea to email professors from kind of different universities that were close to where I live, because yeah, I live in California, so the UC system has locations that are close to me, and I emailed a bunch of professors, and finally two got back to me, and I was finally able to get a data science internship through a professor that normally is not advertised on the internet or on LinkedIn or wherever. It wasn't on any job board. I got it through looking and emailing professors, and yeah, and so through that internship, I learned, I basically learned Teams, and I worked with a lot of Excel, and yeah, yeah, it was really cool.
So tell me, before we get into a little more detail on that, tell me a little bit more about that connection. Like, how was the professor able to get you into this internship, especially since it wasn't necessarily someone you knew? Like, it wasn't a professor you had in the past, right? You didn't know them?
No, yeah, so yeah, I didn't know this professor before, and so I guess how I was able to get it was, well, yeah, one, I just emailed. I was originally kind of looking for, okay, maybe because universities don't typically post like research jobs on LinkedIn or a job board. They usually, don't have to, because there are students that will maybe fill those roles or something. But I emailed a bunch of professors, saying, oh, like I'm looking for opportunities in research or jobs, and I also mentioned like I mean, some people might not be have the luxury to be in this situation, but I told them, oh, I'm not really looking to get paid. That's a plus if I am, but I'm just looking for experience and I would like research, and I sent off my resume. And one professor actually knew a woman who is based in the UK, but she does all of her research remotely. And it's research regarding whale populations, and so he was able to forward me to her that way, and then I got set up, and they were looking for another kind of data scientist, and I actually did get paid through that, so that was nice. But yeah, it was totally like a non-conventional way to look for an opportunity, because yeah, no one else was hiring, and so I had to get creative.
Yeah, I really like that. It's kind of like it's basically like networking, I would
Yeah,
say. And that's
it
something
totally
that we
is.
do highly encourage you to do in the AAC as well, because it is hard to get a job through just the basic application system. There's so many different filters, so many applicants. So the more you can use your network to try to get into different opportunities, the better. Um,
Exactly, yeah. And the AAC helped because, they encourage people to look for opportunities outside of job boards, where maybe go for like a smaller company, or go for people that don't, because like a surprising amount of people don't necessarily advertise jobs on, the mainstream job boards. So, yeah, it's just a matter of being creative about finding opportunities through different ways. And the AAC really helped me with that.
I think something else that really helped in your situation, even though you did end up getting paid for it, I think the fact that you were willing to do it for free,
Yeah,
even if you can volunteer and do something for maybe 3 or 4 hours a week for a longer period, that's still going to
yeah,
help you build up experience. And
totally.
that experience is so, so valuable, probably worth more than maybe the $20 an hour you would get anyway,
It
right?
was,
So
and it worked because it was remote, and I was also working like a job at a grocery store, which is kind of sad, but like that's how I was supporting myself. So I was just like, you know what, I can keep, like, I'm willing to keep up with this as long as I get experience, and it's something to put on my resume while I take exams, and in the meantime, like, I had passed P, and so yeah, it worked out really nicely. Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
yeah, I think it just proves how dedicated you were to making this all work and turning yourself into a top candidate. Like you
Aw,
mentioned at the beginning of our interview that you got hired with just one exam, and even though they were asking for two. And I think that's another reason that just proves that if you are willing to put in the effort to become a top candidate or earn all these other qualifications along the way, the related experience, the technical skills, all that sort of stuff, it's going to help maybe not put so much attention on the fact that you just have, or you have one less exam than they're asking for or something. They're willing to be a little bit flexible because you have so much other great things to offer.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think the other really important thing is I really kind of drove it home to make sure that like I was really committed to the actuarial career path, and like I was committed to the exam track. Like I really emphasized that in my application and in my interviews.
I did this too. When I was looking for an actuarial internship, one of the things that I was a little bit concerned about was the fact that I did not have any exams passed. So when I went to interviews, I was sure to bring this up and mention that I was really dedicated to the actuarial career, despite the fact that I didn't have any exams passed. And I specifically remember someone mentioning this back to me. I don't remember who it was or exactly what they said, but I remember that they did take note of the fact that I was still dedicated to the actuarial career, even though I didn't have any exams passed. And that is something that must have stood out to them, given that they said something about it to me afterwards, after I had already been hired. So if you have any concerns about your particular situation, make sure you address them during the interview. Check if there are things in the job post that they are looking for that maybe you don't have quite the level of qualification that they're looking for. Address those things. Maybe you could ask during the interview if there's any concerns. This is something that I also did. Ask if there are concerns about your candidacy for the position and address those concerns, because if you don't do that, then they might just go unspoken about, and that might cost you the job.
Did I just hear him say he worked with whales? That doesn't seem very actuarial.
That's right. In this position, he was actually using data for whale conservation efforts. And it's not necessarily related to the actuarial field, but he was tasked with doing things in R, like creating a dashboard in R so that the public could see all the different populations and where they are located. He also created models that would estimate the population growth. And he also helped with publishing an academic paper, all with the lead statistician on this project.
I just wanted to say, because the resume course really helped me as well. I actually feel like right when I made some resume tweaks after doing the AAC resume course, I actually started getting more like interviews and making it past those AI filters like immediately. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I think and maybe you have heard me say this before, and maybe others as well, but I've said your resume can make or break your career. So I truly believe that if you don't have a resume that's set up like similar to how we have it in the AAC, or just set up really well, however that may be, it's really going to hurt your chances of getting an actuarial job, because that is how you are presenting yourself to employers. And if they're just not feeling it, then they're just going to go on to the next one, because there are going to be good ones out there.
Yeah, it's so true. And even just like the smallest difference of leaving out, say, like a key word that's in the job description, like that can also just be a big difference. So yeah, I really, really appreciate the resume course that you guys offered.
I'm going to ask you one more question.
Yeah, of course.
And you can take a second to think about it if you need to, but if you had one piece of advice to give to someone that, let's say they're just starting out, they're maybe a little bit unsure about how to make this all happen and whether they're going to be able to make it all work, what's one piece of advice that helped you kind of get through this and actually make it a success?
That's a good question. I need to think about that for a little bit. Honestly, I just think I was so determined to become an actuary that there wasn't really another option for me, to be honest. And also I really had, like, I don't mean to sound like a sponsor or anything, but I really had faith in the AAC, because I saw people, who were maybe a little bit ahead of me in the program. Like I saw people were getting hired out of the AAC and that it was working for them. And also I really, like when I joined the AAC, I also came to the conclusion, like, this is what I want to do. And I honestly didn't really see myself doing anything else. And so, and I was also like I'm willing to be patient and, put in the time to study for exams, or, work another maybe stepping stone job until that actuarial role opens up. So, and then also as, like after I did take the AAC resume, course and went through that, like I started getting more callbacks from actuarial companies, and people started I feel like employers' interest in me, it wasn't like night and day. It was more so like it gradually started growing where it was like, oh, okay, like I'm making it to last rounds of interviews. Okay, maybe I got rejected from this, but like I'm actually making it, and like I'm seeing more interest in my resume and like me as a candidate. And yeah, and like even there was one role I got rejected from that was supposed to be a stepping stone role, but they told me, oh, we think that like the way you talk and the way you answer questions, you sound like an actuary. So like we're gonna forward your resume this way, and unfortunately you didn't get this role. So yeah, it was kind of like those small things, and then like the AAC and seeing people get hired, I was like, oh, you know what, like I can do this, and I was willing to be patient and see it through.
Yeah, I think that's one thing like that I was definitely in the same boat as you, and it sounds like you did as well. And I've seen many others is like once you decide you want to be an actuary, you just kind of make that decision is like this is what I'm going to do, and you just continue to do everything you possibly can until it
Yeah.
happens because it is inevitable that you'll be able to get into that
Oh,
role. It's
yeah.
really just a matter of time, and maybe you've heard me say that before too, but
No,
if you
it's
keep on
totally
putting in the
true.
work, keep on getting better and better and better, become that top candidate, you are going to get a job. It's
Yeah.
just keeping on going.
Yeah, it really is a snowball effect, and especially after you pass that first exam, it really does kind of give you like that boost of energy you need for that final lap per se. Like when you pass those, like it really gets you through. And this is kind of stupid, but one other reason that I was like really set on this was also because I'm gonna turn 26 this month, and my parents' health insurance, I'm gonna get kicked off of it. So I was like, all right, I need to find a job with health insurance. And so at that point, I was like putting my job search into overdrive and kind of freaking out. So yeah, it was kind of funny,
Well,
but yeah,
yeah, that's a good motivating factor for sure.
yeah, yeah.
And
Uh,
so you got in just in time kind of thing.
Yeah, actually, yes. It's kind of funny. But yeah, it was really like the AAC was so helpful. And I just like, I knew with the support of those people and like, you and everybody that I knew I was going to land somewhere.
Yeah, I was fully confident in that as well. Like I know we've had many conversations and I knew you were going to get there. And I'm so glad and so happy for you that you did. And yeah, I think that one of the biggest or best things about the AAC, I'll say, is the community of the others. Just
Yeah.
knowing that there's other people that are doing that at the same time as you. They know all like the terminology that everyone uses in the AAC, and there's people that have done what you're trying to do. So you just reach out, ask questions, and there's a bunch of people in there willing to help you try to get through what they've already gone through.
Yeah, and I actually, one thing that I really enjoyed was kind of like being not like a mentor, but like I guess sort of, but just encouraging for other people because it's funny because like in the WhatsApp AAC group chat, like you make friends in there, and then I actually made kind of like sub chats out of that where like you make friends and then you kind of make little pods like if you're studying for exam FM, and then I also like enjoyed studying or sharing my studying materials with people. And so it was kind of cool to show people like, hey, like I succeeded with this, and then like wanting to help other people who are, in a different phase. And then, getting a job and then showing those people like, hey, this works, and like wanting to help. I really liked that aspect.
Yeah, it really helps to just know that other people have been able to do that even though they're in maybe similar situations to you, but they were able to make it happen. And it just gives you so much more confidence and motivation that it can actually happen
Yeah.
for you as well, too, right?
Yeah, and like I also had lots of doubt, like many times on this, journey. And I was like, oh, like I was never gonna give up, but I was also like, God, like this is never gonna happen, like I thought that many times, and had lots of doubt, and probably more so than not. But yeah, it really does work out in the end when you put the work in.
Yeah, I think it's that mindset of I'm gonna do this. I know I am gonna do it. But
Yeah,
I've had the same struggles as you. Like even when you know you're gonna do something, it's still like that mindset of getting through all the little challenges all the way there.
I think most future actuaries, including myself, expect their actuarial journey to go something like this. But in reality, it looks a lot more like this. You just don't often hear people talk about all those nitty-gritty details and all the difficulties that happen in between. Right now, there are about 200 other future actuaries that are working hard in the Actuary Accelerator community, going through our step-by-step top candidate method so that they can become standout candidates for entry-level actuarial jobs and internships. These are people that are going to get noticed by employers because they are putting in the effort and filling in all the different qualifications that they need in order to actually be able to perform well on the job and get noticed. That means networking, technical skills, related experience, communication skills, exams, actuarial knowledge. You get all of that as a member of the Actuary Accelerator community. So John had success in the Actuary Accelerator community. Will you be next?
The answer is yes, you're next.
Go check it out. I'll leave a link right down below in the description. And as always, if you have any questions about today's video or about the Actuary Accelerator community, I'd be happy to answer them down below in the comments.